You're listening to the Jackson House Podcast, the starting point of your journey to recovery. Whether it's you or a loved one navigating mental health challenges or addiction, we're here to offer support. Get to know the dedicated professionals guiding you, hear powerful stories of transformation, and discover valuable tools and tips to maintain your well-being and sustain recovery. Welcome to your supportive community at both West Coast Recovery Centers and Jackson House. Well, welcome back to another episode of the Jackson House Podcast. Today, I am at our Jackson House Recovery Center in San Diego, Golden Hill area. And with me is Tim Thomas. He is one of the counselors here. And he's going to share some insights about what he does and his role here at Jackson House. So welcome, Tim.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad you were able to participate today and let our audience get to know you. Maybe we can just start with you telling us a little bit about your role here as a counselor.
Yeah. And first and foremost, thank you for letting me be a part of this. This is amazing. I think this is great for recovery and Jackson House in general. So I'm a counselor here. I've been a counselor here for a little over a year now. I've been working for Jackson House for 2 years now. And so my roles kind of play a part of hosting clinical groups, facilitating clinical groups, doing one-on-one sessions. I usually have a caseload of anywhere between 5 to 8 clients at a time. And being somebody in recovery myself, that's kind of how I found myself working at Jackson House. I made a decision to continue my education or gain more education through UCSD extended studies. And as fate had it, I met one person who knew another person, and I ended up here at Jackson House.
Okay.
And before I knew it, I'm here counseling and loving life. So.
And helping other people that were in your same shoes, not too long ago, it sounds like.
Yeah.
So why Jackson House? What do you, being in this industry, what do you see sets us apart from other treatment facilities, or what do your clients say to you about Jackson House?
Yeah, so for me, the first thing that I noticed when I worked here is particularly the staff. A common thread throughout all of us is just this true sense of empathy and compassion and love for working with individuals that are struggling with addiction or alcoholism. And that was something that set Jackson House apart from my experience in other treatment programs pretty quick. Yeah. That's when I knew that I was in a good spot. Yeah. And not only that, but in my professional career as well, there's been so much support, so much. I feel like I'm growing every day, both in recovery and in the professional part of it. So.
Yeah, because obviously a big part of having a successful treatment facility is making sure you have the right professionals that are there. And then having those right professionals means they're happy, they're growing in their own job as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah. You'd mentioned that your own recovery kind of led you into this industry. Do you want to share maybe for some people that are out there listening that either are struggling themselves or maybe they have a family member that is, what is that first step like?
Yeah, well, oftentimes it's somewhat, I don't want to say forced, but it comes to a point, for me in particular, it came to a point where my life had come to a point where I was facing homelessness, really. And we understand alcoholism addiction as a progressive disease. So like many out there, it started with just as when I was in high school, I was out with friends and I was drinking beers on the weekends kind of thing. Before I knew it, it took me a pint of vodka just to get out of bed. Yeah. And I didn't know how I got there. I think for me, the biggest question that I had for myself that I didn't understand until I entered recovery is why? Why do I continue to drink? How many times have I promised myself I'm never going to drink again? And I end up going back to drinking. And once I finally entered recovery, I started to learn about the disease of addiction and alcoholism. And I didn't, prior to that, I didn't even know it was a disease. And being the only one in my immediate family that struggles with alcoholism and addiction, it was just unknown. So I didn't have the answers because I was getting the same questions from family members and loved ones, and I didn't know how to answer them. And it was that vicious cycle. So that was a huge step for me in recovery. Another big step for me was understanding that I can live life sober. You know, oftentimes with individuals in recovery, and particularly in my story, my alcohol was part of me. That's who I was. I didn't know who I was.
It was your identity.
Yeah, absolutely. So that I didn't know if life was ever going to be fun again. And then I got involved in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I got connected with a couple very great people who are a big part of my life today. And sure enough, I realized that I can do this. I can have fun. I can be myself without substances.
Right. So I don't know, but going back prior to, you seeking treatment, was counseling ever in your, field of vision of something that you wanted to do?
No,
okay.
Not at first. No. But as I continued on in my journey of recovery, I kept on hearing from other friends and colleagues to that sparked my interest into becoming a counselor. But primarily, my biggest interest was I wanted to know more about the disease of alcoholism and the disease of addiction. And so I was blessed with a phenomenal opportunity. I was introduced to a company called San Diego Workforce Partnership, who kind of paved my way for my schooling through UCSD Extended Studies. And I knew I was in the right spot because everything in UCSD Extended Studies was so intriguing to me. So yeah, it kind of just blossomed into what it is today. Yeah.
What I hear you saying, and this may be a little bit personal, but it seemed like you were very in tune with figuring out, like you said, the why, and even like studying alcoholism and understanding that it is a disease was a crucial part in your recovery. Did you ever discover or have a conclusion as to what your why is? Or when you meet with clients, is there a common why?
Well, the common why is the question why, right? But everybody's different addiction. That's different for everybody. And there's always so many contributing factors as well. So a great part that Jackson House really focuses on is that question why. So we explore a lot of different areas of life, like the biological factors and the psychological factors, sociological factors. What was my environment like when I was growing up? If is trauma, do I have any experience with trauma? Is that contributing to my substance use? So these are all things that we kind of cater to, which again makes this treatment facility so special because we treat each client as an individual case. It's not just one size fits all. If it was, we'd have the answer, and we wouldn't be here.
Right. It's very individualized and not a cookie cutter approach.
Yeah. So kind of we find ourselves investing ourselves into our clients and being able to relate to that as well.
Yeah.
When entering recovery for so long, and speaking about myself again here, so long I was pushing away all of my feelings and my emotions with alcohol and with other substances. And by the time I get sober, all of the things come all in all at once. The shame and the guilt and the remorse and the regret. And that's too hard to handle. So I know what could fix that right now. And that's some more alcohol. But that no longer works for me.
Right.
And it just makes my life worse and worse and worse. So being at Jackson House, we do get the opportunity to work with clients and individuals that are kind of at that desperate mode where it's hurt, and we're here to help and here to provide this, like, it's going to be okay.
Right.
And there will be progress, and you're going to be okay. And hey, you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
It's going to be okay. We're going to be okay,
Absolutely. Because a lot of times, they just want to have a connection, feel some support. What are some tools that people do to kind of start that process of, dealing with the shame, dealing with the guilt? What are some tools that you typically recommend people to start with?
A big part is connection.
Mm-hmm.
So being connected, and oftentimes we feel so alone. Right. And that's a big part of Jackson House Recovery Center that we really focus on, is the connection, not only with staff, but with the fellow clients as well. It's really cool to see all walks of life, all backgrounds, with one common problem at this time. And that's, I can't control my alcohol or my substance use. So being able to feel connected and understanding I'm not alone, and starting to understand that this is a disease, stop not beating myself up so much, can help with that first step forward to, I can do this, I'm going to be okay.
Yeah. I think a common theme in doing these podcasts that I've heard people talk about is that it comes to a place where you do have to surrender a bit and realize that it's just, you can't control it all, and that you do need the help of others.
Yeah.
Especially to get you over that initial hump,
Yeah, absolutely. And in recovery, everyone is always at a different spot.
Yeah.
Right. So something that we like to focus on too is meeting the person where they're at and their recovery. So perhaps sometimes people don't feel like they're quite ready to give it up entirely.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
So, but let's talk about it.
Right.
What brought you here in the first place? Right. So exploring everyone and understanding, that kind of brings back to that common thread throughout all of our staff here, is that empathy. Like, okay, this is where you're at. So how can we make this better?
Yeah.
What are we going to do moving forward to secure that happy and successful?
I think that's a really good point that you just brought up, that it's okay where you're at, because it is, sometimes people, you go into treatment and maybe it's a little daunting because you go from having this dependence on this substance for however long it's been, to like thinking, maybe they're not ready to give it up completely, but maybe they're ready to tune that dial a little bit and start learning and start connecting with other people. And like you also said, everybody's at different stages, which is a great thing, because it allows somebody to like see somebody that's a couple steps ahead of them and be motivated to get there. And then they also get to be the motivation for somebody that's maybe a couple steps behind them. So that does bring up a really great feature about being in an environment where they're supported and connected with other people going through, similar thing.
Yeah.
So what would you say, like, clients say to you about Jackson House? You obviously see people come in here at the beginning, and then you see a transformation at the end. Tell me what that transformation is like. What do people say to you from the beginning to the end? What's the change?
Fantastic question. One of my favorite parts and one of my favorite groups here, we do coin out celebrations, like a graduation ceremony, if you will.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite questions to ask that client is, it takes a little bit of imagination, but it's like, go back to when you were first coming here. And now you're you today. If you're able to travel back in time and tell yourself one thing, what would that one thing be? And there's a collage of different answers, but generally it's, one, you're going to be like, okay, and this is a good place. And two is pay attention, listen as much as you can. And three, these people are going to become your friends.
Yeah.
And this is going to be your support group.
Yeah. I hear that also too. Just, the people that have gone through here, we have our alumni, and they all just get together and at whatever stage that they're comfortable with, right? It could be just meetings, or it could be events, but just keeping that connection, and these people become your friends, even though in the beginning you probably think that would never happen, but it does.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned alumni, because that's something that I haven't seen in other programs, at least not to the extent of Jackson House.
Yeah.
It is fantastic. It blows my mind.
Yeah.
How much it's become, how much it's grown, and to see everybody, and we have alumni come in and do H&I panels, and it's fantastic. It's out of this world. It's unimaginable how great that's become too. Yeah.
So what if I turn your question on you and I say, let's go back in time, and what would your old self, or what would your self today say to that old self when you were taking that first step towards recovery?
Oh my goodness. Just continue to let go and trust the process. I did suffer. So I moved to San Diego a little over 4 years ago now, and about a year in, I had a really bad relapse.
Yeah.
And at that point in time, everything was kind of over for me. But what happened through that was the individuals that I was working with in treatment then, those are the ones that introduced me to San Diego Workforce Partnership, which now blossomed into being a counselor today. but it's so often we don't know what's going to be happening. It's so easy to focus on the little picture instead of look at the possibilities.
Yeah.
And for me and my personal spirituality, it's about remaining in the moment and trusting that my higher power has my back. It always has, and to continue just to do the best I can. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that. So you mentioned, the spirituality piece was a big part of it for you. May not be for everybody, but maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah. So was one of the wonderful things about Jackson House, because again, so in my personal experience and through having a lot of friends that have gone through different treatment programs, there's a lot of focus on AA. And for me, AA works great. And it's been a huge part of my life. However, that's not the case for everybody, And that's one thing that I love about Jackson House is because we aren't a 12-step facility and we meet the client where they're at in terms of their belief systems. So there's other options that are not AA. There's like Dharma recovery, there's smart recovery. So because oftentimes, especially with alcohol, it's this belief that it's AA and that's it. That's my only option, but that's not the case.
Yeah.
And also there's a lot of individuals that don't have a belief in God, which is also okay.
Right.
But so we're here to help that and to focus on, because more of our modalities that we focus on are like cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, relapse prevention, right? And then psychoeducation, these things that don't necessarily are directed towards AA in itself, but about treatment, the core.
Right. Yeah, and that's true. I think a lot of times AA is just what everybody thinks of or just knows of, but maybe they don't know all the other options that are out there and available to them, which hopefully, through this podcast and the resources that we have, they do know that there's other options to meet them where they're at.
And also there's education about AA as well, because when I first was introduced to AA, I heard the word God, and I went, nope, not for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then entering back in recovery and gaining more education, I learned that it's a spiritual program, not a religious program. That being said, there's also religious programs. There's Celebrate Recovery that's more focused on Christianity. So there are options, main point being there are options for anyone out there to any belief system.
And it sounds to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that at Jackson House, through the help of you, through the help of our, discharge planners, transitional specialists, we are getting to know our clients. It is individualized. So we get to know what is it that they need, what is it that they want, and try to help connect them to those resources that are available to them so that they can explore that and, become the best version of themselves, as cliche as it might sound. But yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I like how you mentioned, what is it that you need? What is it that you want? How can we help? It's a personalized recovery for you. Let's make it work for you.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing that. Well, I guess just to wrap up, what's the best thing for you about working here and connecting with the people and maybe their families? What would you say is, the most rewarding part of your job?
The most rewarding part is hands down seeing the transformation from somebody when they first get here to when they're leaving.
Yeah.
It gives me chills. It makes me cry sometimes to see people, and I'll see people out and about too, like in AA meetings, and they'll approach me and they'll tell me how they're doing. It's a year down the road, 2 years down the road. It's so phenomenal to see that, to see the hopeless state of mind when individuals first come into treatment and then leaving here with like a jump in their step, and being excited to go back to life and to accomplish and the goals that they've set out in recovery.
Absolutely. Well, I can say that you're a walking testimony.
Thank you.
I know the staff here love you, clients that come in here love you, and just your personality in general is just, very genuine. And, it'd be hard to believe that you struggled yourself, and seeing, so that's hope for people to see where you are today and what you went through and what you made come out of that. negative circumstance, so to say.
Thank you.
Last question would be, if there's anybody watching, if they're struggling themselves, or if they have a family member struggling, what would you say to them to just get them over the questions about treatment and to make them feel comfortable for making that call or making that first step?
Yeah. For those who may be concerned with either yourself or if you have family members that are concerned, reach out. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to inquire information about what recovery looks like. It's a scary first step, most definitely. However, it's an opportunity, if you have the opportunity to, that will change your life drastically forever. And an opportunity that you don't want to miss. If you're tired of the constant cycle of trying to quit and going back and trying to quit and going back, life can be okay without it.
Yeah. And just to piggyback on that too, sometimes people do go through treatment and then they do have a relapse. And maybe, I don't know, but maybe there's more shame in asking for help the second time around. How do you address that for people wondering?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a matter of understanding that relapse is not a failure.
Mm-hmm.
That's not. And oftentimes we have to adjust or change our treatment and what that looks like, and it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not the end of the world. And if you had accomplished something, any kind of sobriety time prior to relapse, that doesn't go away.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that you may have learned in the past, it doesn't go away. Sure, the day that you got sober changed, but that's, in all reality, that's it.
Absolutely.
You can take an approach as taking a relapse as a learning lesson, as opposed to disaster.
Yeah.
And
I failed. I'm embarrassed. It's this is just a pivot. I got to do something new.
Yeah. Easier said than done, but at the end of the day, you're not alone.
Yeah. Well, yeah, of course. Well, I really appreciate your time. I appreciate your insights, and anybody watching, the motivation that you, just as yourself, provide to people. So,
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for joining us today. And remember, if someone you know is struggling with addiction or mental health challenges, you are not alone. Jackson House is here to provide the support and treatment needed to start the journey toward recovery. Stay connected with us for more stories and resources, and thank you for being part of our community. Please remember to like, share, and follow and rate this podcast. Your support helps us reach others who may need to hear that they are not alone. Together, we are making a difference, one story, one call, one life at a time.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode. We hope you've gained valuable insights and feel more empowered in your journey. If you or a loved one is facing mental health challenges or addiction, remember, you're not alone. Jackson House can help. Hold on to hope and take the first step towards transformation. Give us a call at 888-255-9280. Your path to recovery starts now.